My cousin Nate has been in the Coast Guard for over a decade. He's the kind of guy who trusts procedures, checklists, and logic. Collected, not someone who exaggerates or gets spooked easily. So when he told me what happened during a maintenance mission off the coast of Maine back in 2017, I knew this wasn't just some sea story. I could see it on his face. This was something that never should have happened. His assignment was a tiny outcrop called Matinus Rock, jagged piece of land no bigger than a football field miles from the mainland. The only things on it were a century-old lighthouse and a weathered storage hut for fuel and tools. No power grid, no plumbing, no internet, just rock, sea, and sky. Normally, lighthouse maintenance is a solo job, but the year before, there had been some strange electrical failures. So they sent two men, Nate and a technician named Russell. The first 3 days were mind-numbingly dull. They scrubbed corrosion off the metal interior of the lighthouse, refilled the diesel tanks for the generator, and tested the beacon's rotation. At night, they ate canned food and played cards. The only sounds were the constant crash of waves below and the steady, rhythmic hum of the generator. Everything was normal until the fourth night. Around 2 a.m., Nate woke up to a strange heaviness in the air. He described it like the world was holding its breath, that static feeling you get right before a thunderstorm. Except when he looked outside, the sky was perfectly clear. Then he glanced toward the window and realized the beaconess light was unsweeping across the sea anymore. It was frozen. The light was supposed to rotate every 6 seconds, without fail. Never ever stopped. He shook Russell awake, and they grabbed their flashlights, climbing the narrow spiral staircase up to the beacon room. The gears were still turning, but something had jammed the mechanism. They found a soaked piece of dark fabric wedged between the cogs. It was thick, slimy, and smelled like rotted seaweed. They managed to pry it free and tossed it out the window, figuring it was just some debris blown in by the wind. But the thing had been wedged in deep, far too deep to have just slipped in on its own. The next night it happened again. Same time, same frozen light. This time the fabric was red, a torn shawl, frayed at the edges, dripping with seawater and covered in tiny barnacles. Nate said that's when the place started to feel wrong. They checked every door and window. All were locked from the inside. There were no birds big enough to carry it, no explanation for how it got there. After that, they started barricading the stairwell with heavy supply crates each night before they went to sleep. But on the 7th night, Nate woke up to Russell whispering in the dark. Just low, disjointed words directed toward the corner of the room. When Nate asked who he was talking to, Russell just blinked, completely confused. He had no memory of speaking at all. The following night, Nate woke again and saw Russell sitting by the window, staring down at the rocks below. He claimed he'd seen someone standing there the night before, right at the edge of the beacon's light, just watching them. The figure would vanish the instant the light turned away. From that moment on, Russell began to unravel. He stopped sleeping, barely ate, started muttering about hearing voices in the stairwell and scratching sounds coming from inside the walls. Then, on the 9th night, they both heard it. Footsteps coming from above them. Slow, deliberate steps descending the metal stairs from the beacon room. Neither of them had moved. They just stood there, staring up into the darkness as the sound grew closer. Then it stopped, about halfway down the steps. The silence that followed was somehow worse than the footsteps themselves. That night, they shoved a heavy dresser in front of their door and slept with their knives within reach. On the 11th night, the beacon failed again. When they finally got up the courage to go investigate, they found the beacon room door wide open, swinging in the wind. Inside, the massive industrial bulb had been unscrewed and placed perfectly upright in the middle of the floor, like some kind of offering. Nate said his blood ran cold. You couldn't twist that bulb loose by hand. It required special tools. As he stood there trying to process it, something brushed against his back. It felt cold, damp, almost human. He spun around, but no one was there. Russell, pale and shaking, pointed at the wall and whispered. It came out of there. A hand came out of the wall. They bolted down the stairs and locked themselves inside their room. Nate said Russell just rocked back and forth in the corner, whispering to someone invisible until dawn finally broke. That morning, Nate radioed for an emergency pickup, claiming a critical mechanical failure they couldn't fix. The rescue boat arrived later that afternoon, but here's the part that still messes with him the most. When the crew pulled up alongside the dock, they asked about the distress call Nate had made at 2:12 a.m., a few nights prior. They said it was a garbled transmission full of static, but they could make out a voice saying, "It's here with us." Nate swore he never touched the radio until daylight, Russell never spoke a single word on the entire ride back to the mainland. He quit the Coast Guard a few months later, moved inland, and has refused to talk about Matinus Rock ever since. Nate still does lighthouse maintenance, just never there. He told me once, in a quiet voice, I'll never forget, that place doesn't want light, it wants dark. Thanks for listening to this story. This all went down during the peak of the COVID lockdowns back in early 2021. Remember that time? Felt like the world had pressed pause. No bars, no parties, no seeing friends. We were all just trapped inside, going a little stir-crazy, living our lives through screens. I was single then, and like pretty much everyone else, my social life was confined to Tinder and scrolling through Instagram. That's how I reconnected with a girl named Sophia. Online, she went by Soph. We both lived in Suffolk County, Long Island, just a short 10-minute drive from each other. Not too far from the famous Montauk Point. We'd been mutuals online for years. You know how it is liking each other's photos, seeing each other's stories, but we'd never actually met in person. That all changed on a completely random, mind-numbingly boring Tuesday night. My phone lit up with a message from her. It just said, "Want to go for a drive?" I'm losing my mind in this house. I didn't even hesitate. Of course I said yes, anything to break the monotony. I picked her up around 10 p.m. She was even prettier in person than in her pictures. She came out wearing a simple black hoodie, her hair thrown up in a messy bun. There was this restless energy about her, that familiar vibe of someone who's been cooped up for way too long. We just started driving, no destination in mind. Put on some music, cracked open a couple of White Claws, and just talked. Felt rebellious, like we were breaking some unspoken lockdown rule. Honestly, that was probably part of the thrill. After about an hour of just cruising the empty roads, she turned to me with a little glint in her eye and said, "Want to see something cool? Let's go to the Lighthouse in Montauk. It's amazing at night." Now, the Montauk Lighthouse State Park closes at sunset. Technically, it was completely off limits, but she didn't seem to care one bit. I paused for a second, weighing the risks. She must have seen the hesitation on my face, because she just smiled and said, "Trust me, no one's out there on a Tuesday night. They'll be fine." And for a little while, she was right. When we pulled up, the parking lot was a ghost town. It was pitch black, completely deserted, except for the rhythmic, sweeping glow of the lighthouse beam cutting through the thick night fog. The whole place felt frozen and timery, silent, almost unnaturally still. We hopped a low fence and started down a dirt trail that led toward the cliffs overlooking the ocean. She took the lead, her phone's flashlight dancing ahead of us as she talked about how peaceful and beautiful it was. But I couldn't shake this weird, nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach. Like we were trespassing on sacred ground, somewhere we really weren't supposed to be. The lighthouse loomed over us like a silent, ghostly sentinel. Its powerful light spun lazily across the dark expanse of the ocean. It was a strange experience. When the beam washed over you, everything was illuminated in stark detail. For a split second, the jagged rocks, the churning water, the salty spray hanging in the air. And then, just as quickly, you were plunged back into total darkness. We were walking along this rocky path right behind the lighthouse, where the cliff edge drops straight down into the sea. The sound of the waves crashing below was the only thing breaking the silence, that is, until I heard Soph's voice, suddenly quiet and laced with confusion. "Hey, who's that?" She was pointing her flashlight back the way we came, and I could see it was trembling slightly in her hand. I turned, squinting into the darkness, and there he was. Man standing about 40 feet behind us, partially hidden among the large rocks. He had his hood pulled up low over his face, hands stuffed deep into his pockets. He was just staring at us. My first thought was that he was park security or a groundskeeper. I called out, trying to sound casual. "Hey, you work here or something?" Nothing. No response. He didn't move a muscle. I tried again, raising my voice a little louder. "We're leaving. Sorry if we're not supposed to be here." Still absolute silence. He just stood there, an unmoving silhouette against the rocks. Then, his voice cut through the night air. It was low, almost conversational, but it sent a chill straight down my spine. He said, "Y'all want to buy some Coke?" Instantly, my stomach dropped. This wasn't security. This wasn't some other late-night explorer. This was a situation we needed to get out of fast. "No, man, we're good," I said, trying to keep my own voice from shaking. I put a hand on Soph's back and gently motioned for her to start moving. We turned and started walking away, picking up our pace, trying to get back toward the fence and the car. But then I heard it. the distinct crunch of footsteps on the gravel path behind us. He wasn't running, he was just walking, deliberately matching our pace. Every few seconds, I risked a glance back, shining my phone light behind us. He was always there, maintaining the same distance. Not getting closer, not falling behind, just following. I leaned over and whispered to Soph, "Don't run. Just keep walking." She gave a tiny, terrified nod. I could feel her whole body tensing up beside me. The parking lot felt miles away. As we got closer to the fence, the massive beam from the lighthouse swept across the area one more time. And that's when my heart stopped. In that brief, brilliant flash of light, I saw them. 2 more figures, stepping out from the deep shadows near the fence line where we'd come in. 3 of them, all moving towards us. In that moment, I knew this wasn't a random encounter. This was planned. They were waiting. We didn't need any more warning. We broke into a dead sprint. Behind us, the shouting started. I couldn't make out the words, it was just a mess of angry voices and the terrifying sound of multiple sets of footsteps pounding on the gravel, getting closer. We scrambled over the fence, our lungs burning, and practically dove into the car. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking uncontrollably, before I could even get the engine to turn over. 2 of them were at the doors, yanking furiously on the handles. The third one appeared at my window and slammed his fist against the glass with a sickening thud. He was screaming, his face contorted with rage, and his words are burned into my memory forever. "You shouldn't have come here." I slammed the lock button, threw the car into reverse, and floored the gas pedal. The sound of their fists and kicks thudding against the car's body was deafening as I peeled out of the parking spot. The tires screeched as they hit the pavement, and I sped away without looking back. They didn't follow. As I glanced in my rearview mirror, I saw them one last time, 3 dark silhouettes, standing motionless in the sweeping beam of the lighthouse, just watching us disappear into the night. The drive home was dead silent. We were both shaking so hard I could hear the half-empty White Claw cans rattling in the cup holders. The adrenaline was wearing off, replaced by a deep, bone-chilling fear. When I finally pulled up to her house, she turned to me, her voice barely a whisper. "We could have died out there." I had no argument for that. She was right. The next morning, in the daylight, I went out to check my car. There were small dents all along the driver's side door. And on the back bumper, clear as day, was the dirty outline of a boot print. I filed a report with the local police, but they said they canvassed the area and didn't find anyone. They weren't surprised, though. They told me that part of the park had been a problem spot for years, a known area for drug deals, and for scaring off anyone who trespassed near the cliffs at night. But then, one of the officers said something that still makes my blood run cold whenever I think about it. He said, "You're lucky." A few years ago, a girl went missing out there after a similar report was made. They never found her. Soph and I stayed in touch after that night. Months later, we could even manage a nervous laugh about how stupid we'd been. But we never, ever went back. And now, whenever I see a picture of the Montauk Lighthouse, on a postcard, or on social media, I don't see the beautiful historic landmark or the stunning ocean view. I see 3 figures standing in the dark, waiting in the silence for the next person stupid enough to show up. Thanks so much for listening to my story. If you have a creepy or unexplained experience you'd like to share, let me know down in the comments. My name's Gregory, and this story isn't mine. It's one my friend Ian told me years ago, the kind that never really leaves your mind once you've heard it. Now, Ian wasn't the type to make up ghost stories. He worked in marine salvage and coastal infrastructure, a real nuts and bolts kind of guy. For him, the ocean wasn't some mysterious romantic thing. It was just part of the job. But there was one trip back in 2013 that made him walk away from the sea for good. Ian was hired by a small county in Washington state to inspect an old, decommissioned lighthouse sitting on a rocky island a few miles offshore. The county just wanted to know if it could be restored or if it had to be demolished. Ian's job was simple: assess if it was structurally safe to even enter. He'd done dozens of jobs just like it. Go alone, take some notes, report back. No big deal. The island didn't even have a name, just a little marker on the map. It was about 300 feet wide, mostly rock, with nothing but the lighthouse and a rusted old generator shed. The Coast Guard dropped him off at high tide and told him they'd DB'd back for him on Thursday afternoon, 4 days later. He packed light, food, tools, a sleeping bag, and a radio. But the moment he stepped onto that island, he said it felt off. Not in a dramatic jump scare kind of way, just wrong in the quietest sense. The air felt heavy, and there was absolutely no sound. No birds, no waves crashing, not even a breeze. Even the ocean lapping against the rocks seemed unnaturally calm, like a sheet of glass. The lighthouse itself stood maybe 50 feet tall, old brick with faded white paint peeling off in long, thin sheets. Inside, it smelled of rust and old salt, the kind of smell that gets into your clothes. He checked the foundation, the winding stairs, the walls all solid enough. He set up his sleeping bag near the base where it was least drafty and started his inspection routine. That first night was pretty uneventful, but he told me something about the crushing silence made it impossible to really sleep. It was a silence that felt heavy, like a presence. On the second morning, a thick, milky fog rolled in. Ian said he'd never seen anything like it. It was almost solid, couldn't see more than 5 feet outside the window. He'd worked through fog a million times before, but this was different. It didn't move or drift. It just sat there, clinging to the island like it was alive. Later that day, while he was inspecting the upper staircase, he noticed a small maintenance closet built into the wall about halfway up. He was sure it had been jammed shut with corroded hinges the day before, but now it was cracked open just slightly, like someone had pried it loose. He cautiously opened it wider, shining his flashlight inside. In the back corner, there was a small wooden box. It looked ancient, soaked through and covered in a layer of green moss. He didn't touch it, just made a note of it for the cleanup crew. He closed the door, shaking his head, and kept on working. That night, he woke up to the sound of footsteps on the stairs. Not the wind, not the old building, groaning. These were distinct measured steps, slow, heavy, metal creaking under a weight that wasn't there. They were moving asterisk, upward, asterisk. He sat bolt upright, flashlight trembling in his hand, staring at the empty stairwell entrance. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the sound stopped. Dead silence. The next morning, he searched the entire tower from top to bottom. He found nothing. No signs of anyone, no footprints, no open doors. But when he reached that same maintenance closet, the box wasn't inside anymore. It was sitting on the stairs, halfway out into the stairwell, as if someone had pulled it out during the night and just left it there. He said he just stood there for a long time, staring at it, his mind racing. Finally, curiosity got the better of him. He picked it up. It was heavier than it looked, the wood swollen and waterlogged. The lid was nailed shut. He carried it downstairs, set it beside the generator, and stepped outside for some fresh air to clear his head. And that's when he saw them. Footprints in the damp dirt around the lighthouse, bare footprints. Not boots, not shoes, bare wet feet, leading from the north side of the tower, straight to the cliff's edge, and stopping. There were no return prints, just 12 distinct steps, ending at a 40-foot drop into the churning gray ocean below. He immediately radioed the mainland, his voice shaking, but the fog was too thick for a pickup. He told him to sit tight and wait until morning. So he went back inside, locked every single hatch, and blocked the stairwell with a heavy steel pipe. He wasn't taking any chances. That night was worse. Around 1:30 in the morning, something slammed the beacon room door upstairs so hard that dust rained down from the ceiling. Then came the knocking. 3 slow, hollow knocks, but they weren't coming from the door, not the window. They were coming from asterisk, inside the wall asterisk. Ian froze. He said it was like someone was standing right behind the bricks, just on the other side, tapping their knuckles softly, deliberately. 3 times. Then, silence again. When morning finally came, the box was gone. Vanished. The maintenance closet door was wide open again. That's when Ian snapped. He grabbed his radio and called for an emergency extraction, claiming a medical issue. He knew it was the only way they'd come for him through the fog. They told him it would take a few hours to reach him, so he packed up his gear in a frenzy and waited outside by the rocks, as far from that lighthouse as he could get. He waited for 7 hours. The fog didn't clear. It actually got thicker. The world turned white. Couldn't even see the lighthouse anymore. Just heard the faint sound of dripping water somewhere nearby. And then he heard the footsteps again. Not from inside the tower this time, from the gravel right behind him. He spun around. Nothing. Just an impenetrable wall of white. The footsteps stopped, and then he heard breathing. A soft, wet, gurgling breath right behind his ear. He bolted for the cliff's edge, waving his flashlight wildly into the fog, screaming for the rescue team. Finally, a boat horn echoed back, faint and distant. When the Coast Guard crew pulled him aboard, he was shaking uncontrollably. They said he looked like he hadn't slept in days, like he'd seen a ghost. Back on shore, Ian filed a short, professional report. It just said the structure was unsafe and needed to be permanently sealed. He didn't mention the box or the knocking or the footprints. He told me later he was afraid they'd think the isolation had made him hallucinate. But after that trip, he changed. He stopped taking field jobs, he stopped diving. He said he was done with water. A year later, I asked him if he thought what he experienced out there was real. He just looked at me with this haunted expression and said, "Some places don't want to be fixed, Greg. They just want to be left alone." I tried to find that lighthouse later. I even used the coordinates he'd scribbled down for me on a napkin, but it doesn't exist on any map. There's no record of any tower at that location. There's no structure, no maintenance file, no name. Just empty sea. That's what still haunts me. The idea that maybe Ian didn't imagine it at all, that maybe the lighthouse itself was never supposed to be found again. Thanks for listening to my friend's story. If you have a story that stuck with you, I'd love to hear it in the comments. If you enjoyed this, please consider liking the video and subscribing for more. Stay safe out there.